Hello, welcome everyone to the Astro Priestesses Summit 2025 and beyond, where we are going to talk about the energies upcoming for the next years and also how to reach Earth and sky in a very practical way. So it's like the cosmos in our everyday life. And this is part of the conversation today with Sara Powers, who is an intuitive business mentor coach and also a consulting astrologer. And her mission is to expand their healing impact by helping other healers to step into courageous leadership. And that's perfect for our summit because it's a lot about the priestess. It's not just in the temple, is the temple is life, right? And we are the temple bridging earth and sky. And our businesses are our sacred offering to the world. So I'm super happy that you said yes to this invitation.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to be here and so honored to be a part of such an amazing collective of Astro priestesses. So thank you for having me.
Yes, and we're going to talk about power, right? So it's perfect for this year that it has a lot of action and Mars and the masculine and the oppositions between Mars and Pluto, but also like how that power is so important for our businesses and whatever we are bringing into the world. So yeah, you can start wherever you want to start in this power dynamic experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so I felt called to, we were talking about what do you want to speak to about the energy of 2025 and how to work with those energies with courage and creativity. And just for me, what's been really present is that Mars Pluto opposition. Um, and even though this is something that, began in 2024, this is going to be a play between Mars and Pluto in the fixed signs for the next 20 years. So that kind of initial uh, opposition between Mars and Pluto kind of set the tone for the relationship between, how we are facing these power dynamics, how we're facing these systems of control, and how to show up to those with courage. Um, and what really, so, first of all, Mars really this Mars Pluto opposition really like knocked me on my butt that I wasn't expecting. And so I was like, oh, I just feel called to speak to this. And it wasn't coming up in my business, but I can absolutely see how this just kind of seeps into every aspect of life. This like, how do you show up when you feel like you're powerless in a certain situation? Like, what do you do with that? And that opposition between Mars and Pluto, that's like the opposition aspect is like a full moon. I like to bring things back to the moon because no matter where you're at in astrology, a lot of people understand like what is a full moon. It's this illumination and like looking directly at one another in the eyes. And so this Pluto, that Pluto represents our shadows, and it's in this process of really bringing things up to the surface that we've been perhaps repressing. And it also speaks a lot to control and power. And then Mars is over here, and like, how do I be in relationship with that control? And then Mars is like this energy of anger, of autonomy, of willpower. So how do those two relate to one another um, in our lives here on Earth? Um, so that's yeah, I'll kind of pause there because there's
Mhm.
plenty more to unpack, but I want to just do a little check-in with you.
Yeah. No, it's perfect because I didn't think it's so interesting. It's also a transit that I'm paying a lot of attention. And I didn't think about the 20 years. Of course, it's like we're having three oppositions. Now we already, when this is going to be aired, the second one already happened. That is January the 3rd. The first one was in November the 23rd, I think.
November
And
4th.
it
I
was in
just
the
noted down all the
elections
notes. Yeah.
during in the States, and here in Spain we had a strong like flooded and a revolution
Mhm.
a little bit. So the political situation is also interestingly woven with these transits. So I'm very eager to see what happens in January. And then the third
Mhm.
one, but I didn't think that, yeah, it's like 20 years of these oppositions. It's not only during this year. Every time Mars comes back to this part of the sky, is going to be opposing Pluto in different areas. So we're going to have a different experience of the same every 2 years. And that I
Mhm.
didn't think so. But in this,
Mhm.
the beginning is very strong because Mars is also retrograde. So, and that is the way we still have that energy during the summit. And how
Mhm.
do you feel that opposition between Pluto and Mars retrograding at the beginning of the year, starting this series of opposition between power and action?
Right, right. Yeah, great question. And um yeah, so that retrograde energy, um that first opposition that happened between Pluto and Mars, there was this election that happened in the United States where a lot of people did feel this sense of powerlessness. Everybody had a different response to it, but um and now with Mars retrograde, um it's like going inward, and what's your inner experience of that sense of powerlessness potentially. I'm kind of speaking from my like felt sense right now of what I'm experiencing. And that's where i'm I'm like exploring, how can I be creative in this place of feeling powerless, or feeling like there's something that's I have no control over, right? Um, and so that's where I'm kind of going within and tapping into that anger as like a sacred rage. Um, and so I have Mars in Cancer, in the first house, and um, my anger tends to like get washed away, um, in like over like just having empathy for people and trying to understand. And so when it does really get fired up in this way, it's really clarifying for me, and it really makes it clear what kind of actions I need to take, or like what I need to cut out of my life. That Mars is that severing, cutting, um, in order to come back to a place where I feel empowered within. Um, so I think, in this play between Mars and Pluto, in which it's going to be between that, Leo, Mars, and Pluto and Aquarius over the next 20 years, um, coming back to that place of where do I stand in my power, even with, systems that are outside of my control, or actions that other people take that are outside of my control. How can I set up boundaries, to protect what is most sacred and tender inside of myself?
I love that. And I feel very much that sacred rage that is very important to feel into it, especially this year with so much Aries going on with all these activations in Aries. And with that Mars and the masculine has been really put in a weird place. It's like if you fully engage with a masculine sacred action and just your desires, your passion, go for it. It's like there is this feeling of judgment, like you have to always be taking care of others, but what is your own purpose in this situation? And with Mars, there is always this independence. Like this wants to separate from the tribe and take action and being autonomous is the in the children, we can see it when they are two, when they turn two, it's like this sacred no, it's like this is mine, and this Mars being activated. And this we have it every 2 years. And for instance, for businesses, Mars is such an important energy because if we don't take action, we are doing nothing with a business.
Mm,
And
right.
sometimes the rage is, or the anger is also showing us where is it that we need to take action, which
Hmm.
parts we cannot do anything. And I always see in this opposition is wherever we have Pluto, there is less that we can do. But
Hmm.
wherever we have Mars in that Cancer Leo area at the moment, there we can take action. So is
Hmm.
where do we have to say no to things because they are not nurturing for us? And that for Cancer sometimes is hard, right? Like to say no to others, to
Hmm.
really nurture yourself and to become a fountain that you
Hmm.
give to others because you are abundant, not because you are lacking something and then is giving to receive, because that is kind of
Right.
like the shadow of Cancer. So I feel
Hmm.
that here is very important for everyone to check where you have your own natal Mars to see where you're called to take action. And at the
Yeah.
same time, where do you have Cancer and Leo? Because this area is going to be activated. And then Leo, what is it that
Hmm.
only you can create? Because that is the
Hmm.
way to change the collective, right? It's like the
Hmm.
more we focus on each of us, what we can do individually, the more in the collective we are making a difference. So I'm super excited with this because I'm triple Aries and I do have Mars in Aries. So it's like,
Yeah.
come on, it's the year of taking action, but that
Yeah.
means that we have a lot to transmute in the process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So this really stepping into like what's mine to do in this situation and what can I do and where do I feel empowered? And yeah, I love what you said about, that Pluto place is this place where we don't it calls for a lot of surrender, right? Because it's something it's not a personal planet. It's this collective subconscious that we're all just like in the fishbowl of, um and that is here for us to, as it travels through signs, that's when things start to really surface for us to then go through this transformative process. And we have a choice if we want to resist that process of transformation, or if we want to empower ourselves and give ourselves, um, tap into that courage to go through that kind of underworld journey with Pluto. um, yeah, yeah. And I see this Pluto in Aquarius, this my hope in is and the vision is that we can see how much power there is in the collective. And I love how you, astro priestesses, have created this summit in which you're doing this as a collective, and how much power there is in that. And in the world when it does feel like there's so much outside of our control, like that Aquarian energy is zooming out and really seeing the big picture. And, when you zoom out and you see how many people there are who are kind of on the other side of those systems of control, there's a lot of people there and there's a lot of power. So if each of us do step into that kind of like tap into our courage, tap into our sacred rage, that Martian place where we're ready to take action, and kind of come together, there's just so much power there for us.
Yeah, and there is a surrendering of control at the same time. If for us, for instance, doing this summit together, we are not sure 100% of like what each one is doing. It's not the same. I have done 5 summits before all by myself. One of them it was with another person, but it was just two of us, so it was a lot easier to check in. So it's a lot of
Mhm.
trust, right? Like everyone is doing their part because we are four. So it's bigger than if it's just two people. It's like when you are co-creating with others, not everything is going to be your own way. And there is a
Mhm.
surrender of like control that I feel is a
Mhm.
very strong message for 2025 with the South Node in Virgo as well. It's like there is this release of having to have everything perfect and all the details and all the steps in order to go towards what we know is for us, what is really reigniting our passions. And for that, I would love to talk a little bit about how starting our businesses and how
Mm.
starting out projects. Maybe sometimes it's not even a business, it's a foundation, like gathering. But if we are moving resources, sometimes we do need resources in order to start that project. So any call that people are feeling in order to make a difference, how, like, for instance, a business can really help to be a part of this shared economy, shared
Mm.
resources, shared power. And I also see it that way, like it's the way to change how the power dynamics are working in the big picture. Like for
Mm.
me, business is the way, like money is
Yeah.
the way. So I would love you to
Yeah.
talk more about that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So you're right. There is so much power when we step in to really like what it is that we believe in. And a business is such a beautiful vessel for that. And I do really feel like business is shifting and we have an opportunity to decide what that looks like. If it's more of like the shared economy, shared power, Aquarius really feels like this redistribution of power, decentralization. And you're right, there is this, it isn't just Mars on one end where yes, you want to be in your stepping into your power and taking action, but there is also on the other side this surrender of control. So that's that polarity, that full moon opposition that we really came in to like focus on that aspect today. Um, and so it is, it's not like an easy like this way or that way. It's how do we kind of be in that dance, and that tension, that creative tension can offer us a new way to show up in our businesses. And you know, there is both a need when especially when you're just starting a business, to have courage, to take action. And a lot of times when you're starting, it feels like there's a lot outside of your control. There's so much to learn. There's so much like where you have to be kind of dealing with systems or with other people in a way that maybe stretches you. So I think it is a little bit of that dance between really standing in your power, and then also knowing when to yield and surrender. Does that answer your question?
Yes, totally. And also,
Okay.
like how two things. One is because it's in Leo, Mars in Leo, like first going back to Cancer and then Leo and the third opposition with Pluto in Aquarius. And I always feel with my mentees for business and brands that there is a blockage in general when it's bringing their own gifts with visibility.
Mm.
And Mars in
Mhm.
Leo is talking a lot about that. Like sometimes we do need
Absolutely.
to take action and organize summits like this. And you have organized, I have organized, and it was the way for me to be more seen. And it moves a lot of
Mhm.
fear. So I would love you to talk a little bit about that block that people are having sometimes when offering their gifts, or any
Mhm.
other things that you feel that are like the first limiting or blockages that you see in people when starting their businesses.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. Yeah. So again, I think it is a little bit like you said, that Leo Aquarius opposition, not even just speaking about Mars and Pluto, but that those archetypes, where, especially a lot of healers, folks who do feel a lot of empathy, who are, empaths. And there's this feeling like, well, there's kind of these beliefs that, who am I to step in to the world in this way? Um, and so, coming back to that Leo energy, it is really this celebration of who you are. And it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. Yes. Um, everybody, has unique gifts, and everybody has their own path, and you stepping into be seen and be seen by the people who really need your work, does not take away from other people living their truth and taking their path. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally, totally.
Okay.
And any other blockages that you feel that are normally showing up at the beginning? Because I think
Mm,
this year, besides this opposition, like there is a lot to really impulse, like initiate something. And
mm,
for many people can be businesses, right? Like if we are
mhm,
tired of how the systems are working, one of the ways to really do things in a different manner is to impulse, like, yes, I'm going to create this and I'm going to make a living out of my gifts in the world. And with that, Saturn moving also like from Pisces to Aries, Aries to Pisces. There
mhm,
is something there about really taking a stand and starting something that is yours. So any
mm,
other blockage that you feel that at the beginning people are encountering when offering
mhm,
their gifts, starting their businesses, offering like social media, all of this. Like, what do you
mhm.
see that can help for them to really take that step?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, there is a couple of things that come to mind when there's the fear of judgment, right? What will people think of me? Um, and and the pain that can come along with being judged. Um, and there's also this fear of both failure and success that comes along because the fear of failure comes from this place of like really having this seed of hope for what is possible, and if you feel like you failed at it, then what happens to that seed of hope? um, and then there's the fear of success, because if you create this thing that you've been dreaming of, it's now no longer safe inside your mind and heart. Now it's like you're living this, and things maybe have to change. Maybe you need to set more boundaries in your relationships because you now need to show up more for this business that you've created. So all of those things can come back to that Martian energy again, um, and really coming back into your power of like, maybe there are going to be people who judge me, and those people aren't for me. And that takes a lot of courage to be in that space, because there is still a potential for pain there. Um, and again, that Pluto transformative process, where sometimes that pain is a part of releasing, but there needs to be that kind of full cycle of feeling the pain and surrendering, and releasing to open up to a new way of being. Um, and then that fear of failure, it is really hard if you feel like you've tried something and it didn't work. And it could be really easy to just kind of go into this space of, okay, well, I'm not gonna put myself in that position again to feel that hope and feel disappointed again. Um, and really those moments are opportunities to grow from and to learn from. And um, I think that's a really good moment to reach out and get support. And that, again, that comes back to that Pluto in Aquarius. It's like, you don't have to do this all on your own. You can get mentorship, you can be in community, and that can really be supportive in that way too. Um, and then finally, that fear of success, where things are changing, and you know we're talking about fixed signs here, so we do want to, there is this desire to stabilize, um, and to not be in this kind of tumultuous change period. So that's when you really want to get grounded in what is stable, knowing that, you know, most of life is just an ongoing change. So finding grounding kind of in your own spirit, in your own essence, the part of you that can offer that stability through all of the change.
I love that. And it is also very connected with how can we ground in our own chart, right? Like how can we bring more of our potential into the world and besides the fear. Normally, I always say to the people I mentor and guide, like, if you have fear, that's a green light. Like, that's the way. It's like wherever you're afraid to, like, are you afraid of recording yourself in camera? Okay, that's the thing you need to do. You're
Mhm.
afraid of sharing your truth and your message and whatever it is that you really think. That's the way, because it's what, and that's very Pluto, right? Like the power is in
Yeah.
really going deep into our shame and shadow and fear. But then when we go there, we discover there is so much power and potential and resources. And if we don't go to that cave, that is repressed, and then is when it gets very violent and repressive and toxic in many cases, right? So there is
Mhm.
this opposition of really going towards the fear. And that
Mm.
requires courage. That is part of the theme for this year. It's like wherever we are starting something new, a new life is coming up, is asking us to face the fears of the collective as well, like anything with technology, with that Pluto in Aquarius. It's like technology by itself is neutral. Is what do we do with that? Can go one way or the other. It's like, what is it that we want to create in the collective? And the more we go in, the more we are changing that collective. And with all of this, I would love you to share a little bit of how can our own charts help us to find that courage, that direction in our businesses, but in general in the way to show up and take action and be
Mm.
courageous.
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, I love everything that you've said and about that, like kind of going into that underground place to really be with those fears so that they don't get stuck there and they just kind of build more power in that place where we're not looking at them, right? But when you go through it, then that power gets released for you to express and to kind of channel where you want it to go with your intention. Yeah. And so, when I'm looking at a client's chart, um, with that question in mind of how do they find their courage, Mars is one of the places that I'll look. And of course, it's going to look different, at different charts. Um, and I do the kind of basic like sun, moon, and rising, as well as the ruler of the chart to really think about like, who are you at your most authentic self? Because a lot of times, that rising sign self, um, it is our most instinctual self, and there can be these ways in which we've been shamed for who we are, and we've kind of like hidden parts of ourselves or so this process of really owning who you are and being unapologetic about who you are, I just really encourage my clients um I mean, when I'm looking at it, I can see all of those gifts in them, and like I can see that just like speaking with them, I can see it coming through, like hearing their stories, and I'm like, that's really beautiful. And they're like, oh, it is like like, and this is something that is going to resonate with the people who are meant to work with you. Um, so really encouraging people to step fully into who they are. And then of course the sun sign talks a lot about our core essence and the ways that we're wanting to grow in our business in the world. So really tapping into that as like this ongoing source of inspiration. um, and then the moon sign, like what's going on underneath and what are some of those kind of those emotional states and those energetic states and how to be fluid in that. So you don't kind of get stuck in this one emotional state around your business, but you can recognize it and you can move through it. And I like to work with the moon cycles. I'm a Cancer rising, so that's really a part of my work too, and finding ways for clients to find their own cycles of, not just always being so I know we talked a lot about the importance of Mars here and taking action, but of course, there's also that second side of things where there's also a time to step back and release um, and let go and be in more of a place of surrender. So really finding those rhythms so that you can be in a business that feels sustainable and fulfilling, and not just like you're just kind of nose against the grindstone all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And it's part of what we are transmuting in the collective, right? This
Mm,
toxic masculine. And it's something that I have observed that is so interesting. It's like when we're moving from a more masculine perspective of the world into a more spiritual, sometimes it's like moving all the way towards the feminine. And it's like just with the moon and Venus and allowing life to happen to us. And then there is a sacred coming back to balance and really finding our receptive energy with the moon, with Venus, and all the yin planets and all the yang planets as well. And the same with the archetypes. And how do we find that balance between giving and receiving, action and resting? And I always say that not doing something is also taking action. Sometimes
mm,
what the sky is asking, and this is hard for me with the triple Aries, like I have a lot of cardinal energy, and many times because I also practice shamanism in the shamanic journeys, the message that I received, it was do nothing. It's like,
mm,
that's the hardest for like, can you tell me something different, please? Can I do something? And it's like, no, at this point, the thing that you need to do is nothing, just trust. And that has been
mm,
such a strong lesson for me of like knowing when it's time to take action and knowing when it's
mhm.
time to just rest and receive more guidance. And I feel that
Yeah.
retrograde Mars coming back to the moment where we are is that revisioning our strategy, like what is it, how can we
Mm,
go in order to take a lot of action in the second part of the year, because the second part
mm,
of the year is really moving us towards a different life. So it's like this first part is what is it that you truly desire? What is it that
mm,
you want that ignites your heart on fire? And that is really celebrating your uniqueness with that Leo retrograding, and how can you feel
mm.
safe being you, and then moving towards a different life. So I would love you to talk a little bit about how do you see this second part of the year and this
Mm,
Mars retrograde helping us to set the stage for that part of the 2025.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I love what you have been speaking to about, naming that it can be really difficult to be in that space of like letting go and doing nothing. It can be so hard, and that can take a lot of courage in and of itself. And you're right, there is so much change that's happening this year and beyond. It really does feel like a pivotal year. And so, being in that space in the earlier part of the year where you are in this kind of Mars retrograde place, I love that you were like talking about revising your strategy, and really getting clear on how you want to be in action before you take action. So you're not just kind of like dispersing your energy, and then burning out, right? Um, and so, Mars turns direct again in February 25th. So then it's going to start moving forward again. And and then it's going to come back into Leo on April 19th, where it will continue until June 17th. So that's going to bring us back into this Pluto Mars kind of energy, right? Oppositional energy throughout that time when each of them are in those signs. Um, so having taken the time to, during the retrograde, Mars retrograde period, to really reflect on, how you want to be in your power, how you want to take action and maybe not acting on it right away and being in that, place of internal resistance, um, will then allow you to be more skillful in the way you show up into some of those external um, dances of power in the world. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And
Mhm.
and then going now to the gym part, like the flowing with the cycles and how like we can integrate the masculine and the feminine and a
Mm.
more sustainable business and projects and work in the world and to really honor our temple and our energies. The moon is key, and especially for women, right? It's like
Mhm.
I always feel that men and women in this case is like we are physically different
Mhm.
and our bodies and this is talking with a lot of yang energy. I do have a lot of fire and air in my chart, but because I'm in a female body, it has been always a challenge of like it doesn't matter how much action I take, there is a body in me that is receptive and that is feminine. So going with the moon cycles really help us as women and priestesses of the sky to really flow with the cycles in a very
Mhm.
tangible way. So you have a free gift that is
Mhm.
about this. So I would love you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Yeah, so this is my three-part training called Moon Magic to Grow Your Sacred Business. And I do speak specifically to how this applies to business, but it can be the same principles can be applied to anywhere in your life where you are moving forward with intention. And it is this really, the moon cycles offer such a beautiful return of these larger cycles, and it really allows us to embody and know intimately what these kind of larger cycles mean for us. Um, because the moon does touch on each of the current aspects, within those 28 days. So there is, a point where the moon's going to be in Leo with Mars, right? In that oppositional place. And that's where you can really feel it in your own body and your own emotions, and to become really present with that. And, you know, what I go over in the training is really about um, going through being with your business and with whatever projects you're working on in a really cyclical way, and creating space both for that outward energy and that turning inward. Um, because like you said, I know with your chart in particular, um, and I also think just kind of as a whole, what we've been taught, at least kind of what I've experienced, is that there is this kind of mythos that you need to always be pushing and going, and it's the place that it's gotten to us in the world is that we've been pushing our earth to this place of it really needs to rest and recover, and yet we keep pushing for productivity, um, and so coming back to, okay, our own power, how can I show up differently? um, I don't have to buy into that. I can show up to my business in a way where I flow with the energy. I flow with that yang energy, when it's time to take action. And then I allow surrender and spaciousness for recovery, for rest, and it's in those places that uh, that creative wellspring comes in, and our we really tap into our intuition, and we can suddenly see things that we couldn't see before. And we would have just kind of blown right past it if we just kept going. Um, and working with the moon cycles is something that's a practice. It's ongoing, you know. This is something that I work with and I still sometimes struggle with. Like I feel like, oh, I have a deadline, I have to do this thing. And really what's being called for is for rest, um, for taking a pause.
Yes. Yeah, no, I love it so much. So everyone who wants, like if you are listening to this in YouTube, you can register to the summit and then you will have access to the free gift from Sara. And I think it's such an important part also to take care of ourselves in these changes. The moon is always, I always say the same as well, like the moon by transit is the way that we are really tapping into the energies, and our natural moon is the way we nurture ourselves. And that's very important when we have a business, because there is a lot of energetic challenges many times. So it's like going back to the place where I feel safe, so then I can show up fully. So working with the moon is such a simple and powerful way of connecting, like bridging earth and sky, that is part of the
Mhm.
theme of the summit. So thank you
Right.
so much for everything that you shared. And is there anything else that you would like to say? Your at the
Yeah, well, yeah, first of all, thank you so much for creating this space, for creating this offering. It's such a generous expression of your gifts and all of the people that you've gathered together, you and all of the astro priestesses. So thank you. Thank you to the audience for, you know, offering your time and attention to receive this. And you know, just looking forward, uh, there is so much change that's happening, and that um, we really need you
Mhm.
to be here and to show up, and so yeah, we just all really need each other right now. And so, um, finding that courage to move through those fears, places of fear, and coming up and joining the collective with love, that gives me hope. So I'm so grateful for all of you.
I love that so much. And I think I always say the same, right? It's like we need each specific person doing their part. And for some of us, it's going to be more collective, more public, more visible. And for some people, the call is to go to the river and sing to the waters. And that's also
Mm.
perfect. It's like we don't have to all of us do the same to be an energetic anchor into the new earth. It's like each person is going to have a different role. And sometimes the role is that singing with a drum or writing poetry, or like, but it's like, what is your role to play? And it's very important that you feel that is important, because as you said, it's like we need you, like the ones who are listening. Each one of us is like necessary for the changes that we hope so. So thank you
Yeah,
for sharing.
absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and so see you everyone in the next videos, and please subscribe, share, because the idea of the Astro Priestesses is that we started just the four of us and we are opening the circle to more and more people. So it's like the more is shared, the more wisdom we can bring forward. So thank you everyone.